The night my mother-in-law looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You will never be enough for my son." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just set down my fork, folded my napkin, and excused myself from the table. And 3 years later, she stood in the foyer of my $8.5 million estate in Franklin, Tennessee, suitcase in hand, asking if she could stay. I said nothing for a long moment. Then I told her I'd have to think about it. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. And for most of my adult life, I was invisible in the one place I was supposed to belong, my husband's family. I met Daniel when we were both 24. He was warm, funny, the kind of man who remembered which coffee order you got 3 months ago. We dated for 2 years, got engaged on a Tuesday evening in the parking lot of a Home Depot, because he couldn't wait until the fancy dinner he'd planned for Friday. I loved that about him. I loved that he was real. What I didn't fully understand yet was that Daniel came packaged with his mother, Patricia, and Patricia had very specific ideas about what kind of woman her son deserved. I was not that woman. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. My mother worked double shifts at a hospital laundry facility for most of my childhood. My father left when I was 9 and sent birthday cards with misspelled names until he stopped sending them at all. I put myself through Tennessee State on a combination of scholarships, Pell Grants, and 22 hours a week at a grocery store deli counter. I graduated with a degree in computer science, and a debt load I paid off in 4 years. None of that impressed Patricia. Patricia grew up wealthy, married wealthy, and had quietly decided that wealth was the only language worth speaking. She lived in a large colonial home in Brentwood, about 20 minutes from Nashville, and she decorated it the way some people decorate their personalities expensively, with no room for anyone else's taste. She wore linen in shades of cream and ivory. She said things like, "Oh, how quaint," when she meant how unfortunate. The first time Daniel brought me to Sunday dinner, she shook my hand with 2 fingers, looked at my shoes, and smiled in a way that never touched her eyes. "So," she said, "you're in computers." "Software engineering," I said. "I work on infrastructure security." She turned to pour wine for someone else. That was the first dinner. There were many more. Over the next 2 years of our engagement, Patricia made her feelings known in the way only certain kinds of women know how, never loudly, never directly, always with plausible deniability. She forgot to include me in the family Christmas card photo. She planned Daniel's birthday dinner on a night she knew I had a work commitment, then expressed gentle surprise when I wasn't there. She told Daniel, more than once within earshot of me, that she just wanted to make sure he was making the right choice for his future. His future. As though I were a bad investment. Daniel saw some of it, not all of it. He loved his mother, and had spent 30 years learning to smooth over her sharp edges. When I brought things up, he listened, validated, apologized on her behalf, and then slowly, gradually began to suggest that maybe I was being a little sensitive. That word. Sensitive. It has a way of making you doubt the steadiness of your own ground. I started to go quiet at those dinners. I learned to nod and eat and contribute just enough to not be considered rude. I learned the shape of my smallness in that house. I wore it like a second skin. Meanwhile, I was doing something Patricia would never have expected. I was building. 3 years before Daniel and I got married, I had started writing code on the side. Not freelance work, something of my own. I'd identified a gap in how small and mid-sized medical practices manage their internal compliance documentation. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the kind of thing you explained at dinner parties. But I understood the problem because I'd watched my mother navigate paperwork disasters at her job for years, and I knew that the people who actually needed efficient systems were never the ones Silicon Valley was designing for. I built a software platform. Slowly, carefully, nights and weekends, for about 18 months. I brought in a co-founder I'd known from college, a woman named Simone who understood product and sales in ways I didn't. We bootstrapped. We charged early clients almost nothing. We learned. By the time Daniel and I got married in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside of Nashville, a ceremony Patricia attended in a white adjacent dress she claimed was champagne, our company had 43 paying clients, and was growing at a pace that made my hands shake a little when I looked at the numbers. I didn't tell Daniel's family. Not because I was hiding it, but because no one ever asked. At those Sunday dinners, no one asked me about my work. Patricia asked Daniel about his job in commercial real estate. She asked his younger brother Marcus about his golf game. She asked the sister-in-law, Heather, the one she'd handpicked as acceptable about her interior design projects. She moved around that table like a hostess at a party where I was someone's plus one who hadn't quite been accounted for. So I ate my food, and I kept my own counsel. The marriage, in its early years, was good in the ways that mattered and quietly difficult in the ways I tried not to count. Daniel was a good man. I want to say that clearly. He was not cruel. But he was the son of Patricia, and that shaped him in ways neither of us fully understood yet. He had learned that peace in that family required a certain kind of compliance, and I had learned, eventually, that maintaining that peace meant asking me to be less. The breaking point came on a Sunday in November. We'd been married for 3 years. Simone and I had just closed a Series A round $4.2 million in funding from a healthcare-focused VC firm based in Nashville. It was the largest professional accomplishment of my life. I had cried in the parking garage of our office building for about 6 minutes, then pulled myself together and gone back inside to sign paperwork. That Sunday, I came to dinner wanting, for once, to share something. I don't know why I thought it would go differently. Maybe I was just tired of the version of myself I'd been performing at that table. We were on the main course when Patricia mentioned that Marcus had just been promoted to senior manager at his firm. Everyone congratulated him. It was genuine and warm. I smiled across the table. I actually had some news this week too, I said. Patricia looked at me with polite, empty attention. Our company closed its Series A, $4.2 million. There was a pause. Your little software thing? Marcus said. Not unkindly, just the way you might reference someone's hobby. It's not that little anymore, I said, keeping my voice even. We have over 300 clients across 12 states. Patricia set down her wine glass. Well, she said, that's very industrious. She said it the way you'd compliment a child who'd organized their bedroom. Then she turned to Daniel and asked whether he'd had a chance to look at the property listings she'd forwarded him. And that was it. That was the entire acknowledgement. Daniel caught my eye across the table. I saw something in his face, not cruelty, but helplessness. He knew. And he looked away. We drove home mostly in silence. When we got inside, I sat at the kitchen table, and something settled in me, not anger exactly, more like clarity. Like a frequency I'd been straining to hear had finally come through clean. I told Daniel that I needed things to change. He said he understood. He said he would talk to his mother. He said a version of that 3 more times over the following 6 months, and things did not change. What changed instead was us. Slowly, the way water changes stone, not violently, but completely. We went to couples counseling for 4 months. Our therapist, a quiet woman named Dr. Anand, had a gift for making things visible that we'd both agreed not to see. She helped me understand that I had been accommodating the family's dismissal of me in ways that were slowly hollowing me out. She helped Daniel understand that defending his mother's behavior, or failing to address it, was a choice, not a neutral position. He tried. I believe that. But some patterns are older than the people inside them, and the version of Daniel who could fully stand beside me was in conflict with the version of him who still needed his mother's approval. He couldn't quite bridge that gap. We separated in March. It was mutual. It was sad in the particular way that only the end of something that was good, but not enough can be. We did not fight. We cried a little. We shook hands with our divorce attorneys and divided our modest shared assets with almost no disagreement. The house we'd rented in East Nashville went back to the landlord. I moved into a furnished, short-term apartment and kept going to work every day. 18 months later, Simone and I were acquired. A large regional healthcare technology company based in Nashville had been watching us for almost a year. We'd known they were interested. We'd taken our time. We negotiated hard. Simone was extraordinary in those rooms, and I made sure we had the right legal team. When the deal closed, my personal proceeds, after taxes and disbursements and the obligations we'd structured carefully from the beginning, came to just over $8.5 million. I sat in the offices of our attorney on a Wednesday afternoon in October, signed the final documents, and drove home through Nashville traffic listening to the radio like it was an ordinary day. Because in a lot of ways, it was. The number on the paper was large. The drive home was the same as it always was. But that evening I called my mother. She was still working, still in Murfreesboro, though only part-time now. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment. And then she said, "Baby, I always knew you had it in you." And I had to pull over because I couldn't see through the tears well enough to drive. I bought the house in Franklin 2 months later. It sits on about 4 acres at the end of a private road. White oak trees on 3 sides, a back porch that looks out over a ridge, and past the ridge, nothing but open Tennessee sky. The interior needed updating, which suited me fine. I spent 6 months working with a contractor and an architect, making choices slowly and deliberately. I moved in on a Thursday in the spring. I did not post about it. I told close friends, my mother, a few colleagues. I lived quietly in it for a while, learning the sounds it made in different weather, the way light moved through the kitchen in the early morning. I had been there about a year when Daniel reached out. He was not asking anything of me, he was genuinely just checking in, the way people sometimes do when enough time has passed. We had a long phone call. He'd started therapy on his own. He was doing the work in a way that seemed real. At the end of the call he said, "I heard things went really well for you. With the company. I'm glad, Claire. I really am." I believed him. He did not mention Patricia. Patricia, I had learned through the loose and involuntary information network that forms after a divorce, had experienced some significant changes in her circumstances. Her husband Daniel's father, Gordon, had retired and made several investment decisions that had not gone the way he'd hoped. The Brentwood house had been listed and then quietly taken off the market. Marcus, who'd been living in a condo Patricia and Gordon had purchased for him, had moved out when they couldn't continue supporting the note. None of this gave me satisfaction. I want to be honest about that. I am not the kind of person who keeps score in a scorebook I return to for comfort. But I would be lying if I said I was entirely surprised. The call came on a Tuesday morning in April. I didn't recognize the number at first. When I answered, the voice was Patricia's, and it was different than I remembered. Quieter. Something had been removed from it. She said she was sorry to bother me. She said she knew it had been a long time. She said things had become difficult and she and Gordon were in transition and she was wondering, and here she paused in a way I had never heard from her before, if there was any possibility that I might have space, or resources, or perhaps just advice, for a temporary situation. I held the phone and looked out the window at the oak trees. I thought about the Sunday dinners, the 2-fingered handshake, the word industrious, the champagne dress, the turning away. I thought about Daniel's face across that table, the helplessness in it, the moment he chose quiet over honest. I thought about my mother, her double shifts, the laundry machines, the birthday cards that eventually stopped coming. And then I thought about something Dr. Anand had said to me once, in one of our last sessions together. She said that the goal wasn't to become someone who didn't feel the injury. The goal was to become someone who could decide, from a place of genuine strength, what to do with it. I told Patricia I would think about it. I told her I would call her back within the week. I set the phone down and made coffee, and stood on my back porch for a long time, watching the ridge in the morning light. A hawk was making slow circles over the tree line, unhurried, deliberate, in no particular rush. I had built something real. I had survived the years of smallness, and come out the other side not bitter and not broken, which felt like its own kind of achievement. I didn't need to prove anything to Patricia. I didn't need her to understand, finally, what she'd underestimated. I didn't need the apology she hadn't quite offered. What I needed, I already had. I called her back on Thursday. I told her that I knew a family therapist in Nashville who was excellent and who had availability. I offered to pay for the first 3 sessions. I told her that if she and Gordon needed help finding interim housing, I could connect her with a real estate agent I trusted. I told her I wished her well, genuinely. I did not offer her a room in my house. She was quiet for a long moment on the other end of the line. Then she said thank you, in the voice of someone who had expected either a door slammed in her face or a welcome mat. and had received instead something she didn't quite have a category for. I understood that feeling. I had spent a long time without a category too. We said goodbye. I don't know if she took the referral. I don't know what happened to the Brentwood house, or to Marcus, or to the plans she'd made for a life that had turned out to be less permanent than she'd believed. What I know is this. That Thursday evening, I sat on my back porch as the sun went down behind the ridge. My mother was coming to visit for the weekend, her first time seeing the house. I'd put fresh flowers in the guest room. I'd planned to make the chicken and rice she taught me when I was 12, the one I'd practiced in the deli counter break room on slow Sundays. The hawk was gone. The sky was going gold and then amber and then a deep, quiet blue. And I sat there in the stillness of something I had built, entirely on my own, from a 2-bedroom apartment in Murfreesboro and a problem no one else had thought worth solving, and I felt not triumphant, not vindicated exactly, but something quieter and more durable than either of those things. I felt like myself, fully, finally, without apology. And that, I've come to understand, is the only revenge that ever really lasts.